What if Hitler had won World War II? Imagine waking up in 1950, 5 years after a Nazi victory. NATO was never created, Europe's remaining democracies are isolated, and most of the continent is controlled, directly or through puppet governments, by Nazi Germany. An important note, this scenario is based on documented Nazi plans and wartime policies. It is a historical counterfactual, not a claim that events would have unfolded in exactly this way. First, a reality check. For Hitler to win, several enormous things would have to change. Britain would need to make peace, the Soviet Union would need to collapse, and the United States would need to fail to liberate Europe. So one of the more plausible outcomes would not involve German tanks rolling through New York. Instead, it would involve a Nazi-dominated Europe facing a powerful United States across the Atlantic. In Western Europe, countries such as France, the Netherlands, and Norway might still have local governments, but real power would come from Berlin. Newspapers, schools, radio stations, and political parties would be tightly controlled. Resistance members and civilians accused of helping them would face imprisonment, deportation, or execution. Eastern Europe would suffer even more. Nazi plans known as Generalplan Ost, or the General Plan for the East, aimed to turn huge areas of Eastern Europe into German living space. Tens of millions of people were expected to be displaced, enslaved, starved, or killed. German settlers would then take their land. The Holocaust would also continue. Surviving Jewish communities would remain targets, alongside Roma, disabled people, political opponents, Soviet prisoners, and other groups the regime classified as undesirable. Concentration camps and forced labor would likely remain central tools of Nazi rule for the foreseeable future. But would Hitler's so-called thousand-year Reich actually last 1,000 years? Probably not. That slogan had a serious warranty problem. The empire would be enormous, violent, and extremely difficult to govern. Resistance movements already existed across occupied Europe, and Nazi brutality constantly created new enemies. In the East, Germany could face a huge and persistent guerrilla war stretching across thousands of kilometers. The economy would also have major weaknesses. Nazi Germany relied heavily on stolen resources, forced workers, and the exploitation of conquered countries. Controlling millions of hostile people, crushing rebellions, and maintaining a gigantic military empire would consume enormous resources. This does not mean the regime would collapse immediately. Dictatorships can survive for a long time through fear and violence. But a Nazi victory would not automatically create a stable or efficient superpower. The world might instead enter a very different Cold War. Nazi-controlled Europe against the United States, possibly alongside an expanded Japanese empire in Asia. Germany and Japan were allies, but they had different interests and fought mostly separate wars. Once their common enemies were gone, cooperation could turn into rivalry. Add nuclear weapons, and suddenly our real Cold War looks slightly less terrifying, which is an impressive achievement. Then comes the biggest question. What happens when Hitler dies? Nazi Germany had overlapping institutions and rival centers of power. The SS, the Nazi Party, military leaders, and senior officials could all compete for control. A coup, a new dictatorship, internal purges, or even civil conflict would all be possible. So if Hitler had won, the result probably would not have been a futuristic superstate with Nazi moon bases. The evidence points to something much darker. Continued genocide, racial colonization, forced labor, censorship, occupation, and persistent resistance, combined with a serious risk of economic, political, and succession crises. A Nazi victory would have created a larger prison and a battlefield that could last for generations.